Howdy, folks. I hope you're enjoying the coursework so far on understanding tarot. Again, this is my way of breaking it down and when I teach tarot students. So here we are in part 3, and what we're going to talk about are the next 3 gateways in this one, which are going to be Death, the Devil, and the Tower. Now remember, like I said last time, everything in tarot is very engineered, because it's meant, the cards are there as a way to remind us and guide us through things. And again, everybody generally probably gets things a little too on the nose. You do have to look at the way, the context and the historical time frames that these things were created in and what they were referring to. So we're not talking about placement spreads and stuff like that. What we're talking about is your spiritual journey. So what they, in general, they call it the Fool's Journey. Just to kind of recap, we all start out as the Fool, and we are thrown into this world by God's will, whether we want to or not. And we've gone through the first 3 gateways. So you've gone through the Hermit, and at this point in the journey, you've been through a few things. You've gone out there and tried to assert yourself, tried to maintain your goals while also maintaining your own personal integrity. And that's what the Hermit's all about, is reflecting upon the trials and tribulations you've been through. So immediately after the Hermit comes the Wheel of Fortune and Justice. And they're kind of, I don't really consider those gateways. They're kind of more like rewards in a way. The reward of knowledge is the Wheel of Fortune. So you understand that, life has a way of, throwing random things at you, but also you have the ability to affect things going on in your life. So you don't want to tackle it like walking carpet. And justice is kind of the recognition when you do put in the hard graft or the hard work in order to affect outcomes around you. Once you get to that and you realize you need to put the hard graft in and stuff like that, you get to the Hanged Man. And the Hanged Man is essentially an obstacle. Some people never get past this stage. We all know very dithery people who can't make a decision, who will wait until anybody else makes a decision for them, or they are forced by life to do something and they think that's a decision. Because beyond the Hangman is death. And the Death card, again, isn't on the nose. What it is sacrifice. It's the recognition that things will change once a decision is made. And some people, many people, absolutely hate that. They run a mile from that. I've met many people like that. I guarantee you have as well. If you are listening and you are one of those people, what you need to recognize is that you're completely leaving yourself open to the Wheel of Fortune. You're completely leaving yourself open to the whims of anything. The whims of here in the temporal plane, you're definitely leaving yourself open to things in the spiritual plane, which we'll get to that in different videos. Nothing to do with the tarot, but beyond tarot, again, and this is something that I'll probably get to later on, maybe it's a good time to talk about it here. Like I continually talk about tarot being a gateway, here we're talking about mini gateways. The whole deck itself is a gateway, and it can be an initiatory, say that one 5 times fast. It can be an initiatory system in a way, introducing you and guiding you toward better spiritual understanding of yourself. That's the way I tackle it with many of the clients and many of the students. Because beyond that, once you come to terms with all that, then you start doing spreads in that context. And if you're doing, especially if you're doing spreads beyond the traditional, cross my palm with silver and let me know my future, all that kind of nonsense. If you're getting beyond the, does he like me? Does she like me stuff? The question then becomes, what's next? And what's next after the initiatory process is more spiritual work. Then you get into grimoire traditions. And that can be a way of trying to practically affect and spiritually affect the world around you. I generally don't like to use the word magic, but essentially that's what we're talking about. But in order to get to that point, everybody wants to get to the point where they're talking about the sexy stuff. You have to go through this initiatory process. And tarot can be used in that way. So back to this. So you could talk about the Hanged Man in that circumstance. Do you want to continue forward? So if we're talking about a spiritual journey here, understand if you continue forward in your spiritual journey, there will be a death. So many spiritual students that I talk to talk about in the process or the pursuit of awakening, in the process and in pursuit of reaching a higher consciousness, what ends up happening is they feel very separated from other people. They feel very alone. We can get into that in a totally different video because I don't want to widen the scope here too much. But that's an example of a death. Any kind of realization you go through, even if you're just something a lot more mundane, school. If you go to school and you research something, that's a type of death, a death of ignorance towards knowledge. So that comes after the Hanged Man. And after death, your reward is temperance. Temperance is the recognition. Again, I've talked about this in the first video. For my mind, temperance and the hermit are essentially the basis of all the tarot. But you recognize there has to be, again, a give and take between who you were before this change and who you are now. And after temperance comes yet another gateway. Seeing that we're talking about spiritual journeys, another way that you can equate this, and I haven't talked about it as far as a correspondence to tarot before, but another way you can equate these middle three gateways is they're definitely a lot like the dark night of the soul and the void on the spiritual journey, which I've talked about this in a previous video, Intro to Spirituality, if you want to check that one out. But after temperance comes the devil. And in order for temperance, the reason the devil comes next is the devil, if you look at the little packet in your book, or you look at any book on tarot, they should talk about the devil isn't not a card that's on the nose. It's not about like what the Christians, hardcore Christians would say, temptation. What it is about is dependence, or in this case, over-dependence on something. And when it comes to your spirituality, it is dependence on the thoughts, the ideologies that you used to hold as true. And you have to recognize to let go of that. These are basically toxic things. So if we want to go to a kind of a placement spread type question with a client or a seeker or classically a querent. I don't like the word querent, to be honest. I usually use seeker. But if a seeker's in front of you and it's a relationship question, which happens a lot, you get the devil. The devil's talking about a toxic relationship, codependence, overdependence upon one another. But in a spiritual journey, what it is being a slave, being dependent towards all these things that you thought you held true. And in order to grow, you should realize that you have to let them go, which is why the Tower comes next. And as we all know, the Tower is all about an upheaval in your life. And on the spiritual journey, it's kind of the letting go. Instead of me explaining it, I think it's at this point that I'm going to let a very famous scene from an older movie take over to explain it.
Eckhart saw hell too. You know what he said? He said the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, attachments, they burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. Relax. Good. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth. It's just a matter of how you look at it, that's all.
So whenever you are on a spiritual journey, you will always go through a change, recognize through that change that there has to be a give and take again. And part of that giving and taking is understanding that you have to release some of the old tapes, the old ideas that will no longer serve you, even though they might be very familiar to you. Some of them even make you feel safe. Some of them have even worked for you before. These are, if you haven't cottoned on yet, basically what we're talking about here is the ego. So you could call the devil and the tower together. You could definitely call that ego death or egoic death. And once you go through the tower, you're definitely on the spiritual journey. You're definitely in the void territory. And that can be really challenging for folks, which is why, jumping back to the Hanged Man, this is why the Hanged Man is before all this. Because somebody who, perhaps you watched all my videos, whatever, few of them there are at this point. I'm building up. But perhaps you watched them and okay, I know this is coming. I know that if I continue with my spiritual journey or I continue down this road of whatever I'm doing in my life, that there's going to be a massive change and I'm going to have to let go of some ideologies and I just don't want to deal with that. Again, some people run a mile. You almost can't blame them in a way. But if you want to succeed in life, if you want to succeed in your spiritual journey, if you want to grow never mind succeeding in your spiritual journey, if you just want to grow as a person, there will always be change. So don't be afraid to do that, because as we zoom back out here to the main picture, as we know, after that tower comes the next 3 gateways. So I know this one was a little bit of a shorter one. I hope it helped. There's a heck of a lot more that we're going to talk about. The next video I drop, I'll probably drop it a little bit earlier. We're probably going to do, say, Monday, Tuesday next week. We'll talk about the final 3 gateways of the major arcana, and then we'll be going on to the minor arcana. Now, keep in mind, this is all through a Hermetic tradition, and mainly right now we're talking about the spiritual journey. We'll probably talk about placement spreads a little bit later on, but to be honest, I think there's enough material out there. One of the things that I don't see, and I kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier here a few minutes ago, one of the things I don't see is I don't see people teaching it from a Hermetic Kabbalah type tradition. I don't see tarot being talked about as a way of the uninitiated gaining access to their own personal spiritual journey. This is the main crux of how I use it with my students and clients. And then on top of that, it's also an initiatory gateway towards more grimoire style work, more magical grimoire style work, which I'll definitely get into later on if you're into that kind of stuff. So after probably a little bit more of a preview, once I'm done with the minor arcana, to keep up kind of with the Hermetic traditions and the bringing in the grimoires, I'm going to start talking about angelic correspondences, because that is definitely never talked about, and how you can bring in astral magic, zodiacal magic, and zodiacal correspondences, and what is called the angels of the Shem HaMephoresh, which is a wonderful gateway into grimoire magic. So stick around, listen up. If you have any questions, comment below, and you can always catch me either here or I'm on Reddit as well. I'll leave a link below. or, of course, over at the website at tarotpathwork.com. Thank you.